On the cold morning of February 16, 1911, a gardener in Mussoorie noticed something unusual behind a cluster of rocks near the Mullinger estate. What he first mistook for discarded cloth was the body of a young girl, lying unnaturally still against the hillside. Within hours, the quiet hill station would become the center of a storm the British Empire never saw coming. Her name was Sharada Devi. She was 17, educated, admired, and the daughter of a respected Indian civil servant. By sunset, whispers had already begun spreading through town. The man accused of killing her was not a drifter or a bandit, but a powerful British officer, and not just any officer. He was Allan Octavian Hume Jr., son of the founder of the Indian National Congress. The irony was almost unbearable. The father had helped create a platform for Indian political voice, and the son now stood accused of silencing one forever. But this story did not begin with gunshots. It began months earlier, with letters that Sharada never answered. Hume had developed what he called an interest in her. Others saw it for what it was: relentless pursuit masked as romance. He followed her walks, appeared uninvited at gatherings, and sent notes she returned unopened. Her family complained quietly at first. They believed the system would protect them. But in colonial India, complaints against British officers had a way of disappearing. Sharada was not reckless. She avoided him, refused conversation, and made her discomfort clear. Yet refusal only seemed to deepen his obsession. On February 15th, she stepped out for an evening walk with her younger sister along a familiar path near Mullinger estate. It was a route they had taken countless times, considered safe under the fading light of the hills. But safety can be an illusion. He was waiting. Hume stepped onto the path and blocked their way. Witnesses later said his voice was controlled, almost polite, as he insisted on speaking with her alone. Sharada refused, firmly and publicly. It should have ended there. A refusal. A man stepping aside. A girl walking home. Instead, he reached for her arm. Sharada pulled away. Her sister screamed. For a split second, Sharada broke free and ran toward the bend in the path, skirts gathered in her hands. Then the hillside cracked with 2 gunshots. They were close together, deliberate, echoing across the valley where British families were taking their evening strolls. When people rushed toward the sound, they found her behind a rock, blood darkening the soil beneath her. She had been shot in the back and in the head. Hume stood a short distance away, revolver still in his hand. He did not flee. He did not collapse in panic. He waited. Unlike so many colonial crimes that vanished into paperwork, this one could not be buried. Too many British witnesses had seen too much. The administration had no choice but to arrest one of its own. The trial began in April 1911, and the courtroom filled beyond capacity. 12 British men sat in the jury box, tasked with judging another British man for killing an Indian girl. Outside, the Indian public already believed they knew the outcome. The prosecution laid out a clear chain of events. Months of unwanted attention, complaints filed. A loaded revolver carried to a known walking route. A confrontation followed by 2 shots fired at a fleeing girl. It was not complicated. It was chillingly simple. But the defense shifted the battlefield. They did not deny the shooting. They reframed it. Hume, they argued, had been overcome by temporary insanity brought on by romantic obsession. They suggested that Sharada's rejection had unbalanced him, that the tropical climate strained European minds, that passion not malice had pulled the trigger. The implication hung in the air like poison. She had driven him to it. British doctors took the stand to explain how mental instability could arise in colonial settings. They described his fixation as evidence of emotional disturbance. The narrative began bending dangerously away from the victim and toward sympathy for the accused. Then Sharada's younger sister took the stand. She spoke clearly, without trembling, in precise English that filled the courtroom. She described the letters, the fear, the repeated refusals. She described her sister running and the sound of bullets striking someone who was trying to escape. People who are tempting someone do not run. People who are in love do not shoot from behind. Her testimony cracked the defense's carefully built illusion. Even members of the all-British jury avoided her gaze. Witness after witness followed, including British residents who had been walking nearby. They described Hume as composed after the shooting, not hysterical. One woman used a single word that would echo through the trial: frustrated. Frustrated, as if denied something he believed he deserved. The jury deliberated for 6 long hours. In colonial India, such cases rarely required that much time. When they returned, The courtroom fell into a silence so complete it felt suffocating. "Guilty of murder," the foreman declared. For a moment, it felt like history had shifted, but then came the second sentence. "We recommend mercy." It was a lifeline thrown across race. The judge accepted the recommendation. Instead of the death penalty mandated by law, Hume was sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor. It sounded severe. It sounded just. It was neither. Within 3 years, he was quietly released and sent back to England. No public apology, no ceremony, no reckoning. The Indian press erupted. Headlines spoke of justice denied and lives weighed unequally. If a British man could kill an Indian girl and serve barely 3 years, what was the value of Indian life under British law? Protests broke out across Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras. Students marched carrying Sharada's portrait. Speakers at political gatherings invoked her name as proof that the legal system served power, not truth. Even Allan Hume Sr., the aging founder of Congress, issued a public statement expressing grief and acknowledging his son's guilt. It was a rare admission and one that isolated him within British circles, but it did not change the outcome. Sharada's father resigned from government service, unable to continue under an administration that had failed his daughter. Her sister became an advocate for women's safety and political reform, carrying forward a fight she never chose but could not ignore. The case became more than a tragedy. It became a symbol because Sharada was not the only victim of colonial entitlement. She was simply the one whose death had too many witnesses to erase. How many others were silenced in private bungalows and remote postings? How many complaints never made it to courtrooms? In 1914, when Hume walked free, the message was unmistakable. The law had two standards, one for the rulers, one for the ruled. Sharada Devi was 17. She had plans, friendships, and a life unfolding before her. Her only act of defiance was saying no. And that, in a system built on hierarchy and entitlement, was enough to cost her everything. The Sharada Murder Case forced a question into the heart of the independence movement. What is the worth of justice if it bends to race? What is the value of law if it cannot protect the vulnerable from the powerful? Her name faded from textbooks over time. No grand memorial marks the hillside. Yet her story survived in speeches, in pamphlets, and the quiet anger of those who demanded change. Allan Hume Jr. lived into the 1950s in England. Sharada never saw her 18th birthday. If you are wondering whether justice was served, the record speaks plainly. But the deeper question remains. How many systems today still protect the powerful first? How many victims are doubted, blamed, or reduced to footnotes because their lives seem easier to dismiss? Empires fall, flags change, laws are rewritten. But unless justice is equal, the pattern repeats. And Sharada's story, born on a quiet hillside in 1911, becomes less about the past and more about what we are willing to tolerate now.